Hi all and welcome to the Tony Tonkin Show. Glad that you could be with me on this Thursday afternoon. I was scheduled to have Avery with me today, but however he is unwell, perhaps overwhelmed by his feed yesterday where he talked about Christianity. So I don't know what happened there, and we do wish Avery all the best in terms of his health and hope he recovers really soon. So today is a time for all of us to have a conversation with me about some of the topics that I'm going to talk about, which will be about politicians spreading hate as espoused by Chris Kenny. We're looking at Israel-Hamas situation and the horrible things that have been happening there, and whether or not it is likely that Gaza will actually wind up being the place that everybody would like it to be, a Palestinian state, or whether or not Gaza's just going to turn out to be some sort of, playground for the rich and famous to be able to build whatever they need to build there so that they can develop it into what Trump initially thought would be a fabulous place like the Riviera in the Middle East. So who knows what that's going to look like. We're going to look at some horrible things that have been happening in Gaza since the ceasefire. And I'm also going to have a look at, just briefly, a situation in the United States in terms of what ICE are doing. I'm also going to have a look at visas, because there's a number of cases in relation to whether visas are being permitted in countries such as UK, Australia and the United States. And I'm going to have a look at what is actually happening there. And then I'm going to look at, I forgot what his final title was. I'm going to have a look at an issue which came out in a law magazine, or a law web page, I guess, Sydney Criminal Lawyers, which is talking about anti-Semitism and whether or not it was appropriately reported. So they're the topics for the day, and I invite you all to partake of this. I'm not a Liberal Party, a right-wing Sky News lover. James has somebody to report on. Jimmy, I don't know whether you're new or not. I think you might be. Welcome aboard, and welcome to anybody who wishes to have a conversation with me. More than happy to do just that. And of course, I need to just remind you to subscribe to my channel, ring the bell for further notifications. We're heading towards 7,000 subscribers, and hopefully we'll gain that by next week sometime, and just participate in that because it does help me at the end. And remember to share my videos, and certainly to comment. I'm anxious. I love the comments that we get on my show, and I hope you can find the space and the time to comment. It doesn't matter. Just don't be too obnoxiously rude. I think in the 2 years that I've been doing this now, I've only kicked 3 people. I've only deleted 3 posts, which isn't bad, because some people say some pretty nasty things from time to time. I've watched you live stream before. I'm just messing with you. I'm trying to joke, but it failed miserably. Sorry, James. I apologise for that. It's hard, and I must confess, James, I appreciate what you said. It's really difficult when I'm doing this just on my own, because I have to try and keep track of the messages. I've got 4 screens in front of me, and trying to keep track of what each one is doing is sometimes a challenge. And I do love the guys who've got thousands of subscribers and can afford to have somebody sitting beyond them, editing and doing the things that they need to do during a live feed. I just can't do that. I'm doing it all on my own, mouses, buttons on my Stream Deck and other things I'm doing to try and keep up with what's happening. It's much easier when Avery's here, because he can be talking and I can be farting around with the technology. So thanks everybody for coming on. There's quite a few people here at the moment. I really do appreciate it. I'm going to start with, I was going to do a singular post on Sky News and a Chris Kenny comment, because I am concerned about the degree to which the right wing are spreading hate, and the impact that has on our community. Now, it's not just hate around anti-Semitism, it's or Islamophobia. It's also just a general sense that whoever the other side is, for whatever reason, we must hate them. You know, it's like, I object to many of the things that Sky News put out. I object to some, and I'm doing some work also on another right-wing podcaster who seems to be relatively successful, but says some bizarre things. I've got a post that I've organised to do on him, and you'll find that out. Just stay tuned, and I'll probably release that the next day or so. But it's important to be able to understand that there are other views. I just simply have a different view. I'm not. I'm progressive, but the point is, I come from a background and an experience as a social worker where basically I tend to look at the constructs behind the way people have chosen to be the way that they are. I try not to judge, and I certainly look to matters which are about social justice, equity and fairness. They're the key things for me, not necessarily destroying somebody. But we must push back against some of the terrible things that we hear and see coming from the right. And if they came from the left in the same way, I'll be just as adamant about how horrible they are. The attack that we have, particularly from the right wing in politics, about how terrible the left are, I find relatively appalling and misguiding in terms of, the fact is that it's always the radical left. I've never, ever, probably until now, ever talked about the radical right. But there's a horrible right wing, not just in the United States and in Europe and in the UK, but here as well. And we need to push back against them, even though I must confess, here in Australia, not as horrible as we see it elsewhere. So I'll go straight to this conversation point around Chris Kenny, and we'll have a conversation about that as well. So here's the bit about Chris spouting about, so the title of it is Politicians and Pro-Palestinian Protesters Have Effectively Done Hamas Bidding. That is a conversation that we need to have, and I think we'll have that as well. But this is particularly around the way Chris talks about and describes this notion of hate.
So I want to say something to the pro-Palestinian protesters in the West, the anti-Israeli protesters here in Australia, and the politicians like our own Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and Foreign Minister Penny Wong, who effectively have done their bidding, caved in to their demands by recognising the non-existent state of Palestine.
Now, on this, I think this. So I'll try and take little bits and pieces of this, and we can start to pull it apart. Now, you don't need to be, according to the United Nations, and I haven't got the information, but I did read it. I do try and do my research as best as I can to verify certain things, but you don't need to have a hunk of land to be a state. You can be a group of people who require some form of recognition. And this is what the Palestinians are doing, have done, and the Albanese government and 140 other countries around the world thereabouts have also done the same. That it is important that we at least recognise that these people exist, and that it is important for them to have their own land, and that we must recognise their right to sovereignty, even though at this moment they haven't got a declared piece of real estate. Now, and the thing that amazes me about all of this is there are Palestinians in the West Bank and there are Palestinians in Gaza. These are all closed areas, so they're fenced off in some way, and particularly in the West Bank, that is fenced off, and the Israelis have certain rights that they've developed in order to settle in the West Bank, and they also haven't had the same. There were settlers originally, I believe, in Gaza. They at some point were kicked out, but that has been an area which is simply an outdoor prison, basically. So this notion of sovereignty is something that interests me because they do have their own land. We can't. It's hard for us to deny that simple fact. They do have their own land, but the point is, it's not they don't have, and they did have with Hamas, and some 20 years ago Hamas were voted in as the rulers of that particular country, or that area, but they didn't have any significant recognition. The point is that we want to give Palestinians recognition. Put Hamas aside for a moment. We just want Palestinians This is not rocket science. This is not unjust, and it's not being discriminatory against Israelis. It is just saying, simply, we want Gazans, Palestinians, to have their own space, their own place. In the meantime, what Israel have done is they've destroyed that place. So, and there's a lot of politics around all of that, and admittedly I don't understand it all, but nevertheless, this particular dude seems to think that he's got all the answers.
And breaking with the US and Israeli strategy of confronting Hamas. The protesters say they want peace. The politicians say they want a two-state solution. But the reality at the heart of the protest movement is really something more hateful. They want to get rid of Israel, as we heard on the weekend.
Now, this is about to play a clip of this guy, and I'm not here to agree with necessarily what this dude has to say. But remember, this is one voice. There are many voices in this discussion. But what you'll find from Sky News and the Murdoch press is that they will present that one image, the one clip, the one, just that one moment where someone says something that is controversial, and somehow, once that's said, that means everybody thinks the same.
As long as Israel exists, a genocidal and apartheid regime, there will not be peace for the Palestinian people.
That part I agree with. It is a genocidal regime in terms of what they've done to Gaza, and also, I think we need to acknowledge the fact that Netanyahu himself has referred to the river to the sea as being the space in which Palestinians are eradicated. That includes the West Bank and Gaza. So there is no doubt in my mind, and there shouldn't be any doubt in anybody's mind, that even though the river to the sea has been used to identify Palestinians' attitude towards Israelis, the issue is that that has been used also to identify the plight of the Israelis to abolish and get rid of, and therefore the genocide in relation to Gaza and the Palestinians in particular.
Yeah, so now that the guns have been silenced and we hope for an enduring peace, we have to consider outcomes. After all that death and destruction, after the slaughter of Israelis, the hostage deaths, military casualties, and up to 60,000 Gazans, perhaps up to half of them Hamas terrorists. This
incidentally is the first time I've heard someone, and to Chris's, I must congratulate Chris, I guess, for at least mentioning this. This is the first time I've heard him mention the 60,000 Gazans who have died, potentially 100,000, many of them women and children. And that even though I've been banging on about this, people on the left have been banging on about it for a long time. It is important to at least recognise that on this occasion, Chris was able to identify and to at least, I guess, speak the truth.
But undoubtedly thousands of civilian casualties, including children. Well, we have to ask, what did Hamas achieve?
I think so this is the point. So is it really thinking about what has Hamas achieved, or is it also considering what Israel has achieved by all of this? The reality is that I think Israel could have put an end to this some time ago. That Israel could have decided after a few weeks or months, whatever, that they'd done enough damage and to negotiate with Hamas. Earlier this year, there were two negotiations in January and July, I think, in relation to ceasing the war. And on both occasions, the proposals were agreed to by Hamas to some extent, but the Israelis broke those treaties or broke those peace agreements. So it was evident that it's been evident all the way through that the Israelis were not ever interested in peace. They were interested in total destruction of Gaza. And it's important, I think, that we continue to remember that. because as horrible as Hamas is, and we're going to talk about that in just a moment, as horrible as Hamas are, and when you think about, which one of these two groups is the worst terrorist group, it's hard to work out which one is. It's now been also revealed from many of the prisoners that have been released from Israel back to Palestine or Gaza. Many of those people have talked about the horrific abuse that they have received, and they've identified the many deaths that have been caused by the IDF while these people have been in captivity. So when one tries to balance out who is the greatest terrorist, I guess at the end of the day, what we can say is that both of these groups are terrorists. It's as simple as that. And the question that we need to ask ourselves is, and there are three options here. Are we going to side with Israeli terrorists, Hamas terrorists, or the civilians, the innocent people, the Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank? I'm opting for the third notion. I don't know where you might sit around all that. Be interested to know what you think.
Look at Gaza. Large parts of it are levelled. So its people are homeless, just living day to day and getting shelter.
And Chris really needs to ask who did all that. It wasn't Hamas. It wasn't. But he'll have you believe it was.
Healthcare and food and water and electricity will be a challenge for many more months to come. Now, if the peace holds, Gaza will be able to rebuild and it will be autonomous. It'll run its own affairs. But that's what they had before all of this started. Israel withdrew from Gaza in 2005. Their army had to forcibly remove Jewish families who were determined to stay there. And so the Palestinians have had Gaza for 2 decades.
And we should also note that the Israelis armed and provided funds for Hamas as well at that particular point in time.
Tragically, they elected Hamas and they were never able to shake off these Islamist extremist fanatics. And 2 years of war and thousands of dead Palestinians and the destruction of homes and infrastructure is the result. So that's what Hamas has delivered. By normal reckoning, by your standards.
Could someone explain to me when he says, and we're spending a lot of time with Chris, I'm sure Chris will watch my show and complain. No, he won't. But one of the issues, of course, is the destruction that has been caused by Israel, and whether, and you don't, even though there was some acknowledgement from Chris about the 60,000+ people that have been killed, and a lot of them women and children, there's no sense of empathy. There's no sense of really understanding what this is like for them. The focus always comes back to Israel. And I guess we need to be mindful of the fact that people like Sky News are funded by Murdoch Press. They know that Israel is or Jewish people, not all of them, and this isn't an anti-Semitic comment, but the Jewish lobby is pretty strong, even though there are counter-Jewish lobbies to all of that. And there are Jewish lobbies that are horrified as to what the IDF are doing, and there are many Jewish people who sit on the same fence as I do around all of that. But they want to continue to tell us that this is a Hamas problem, while recognising the devastation that Israel has done.
Standards in mind, you would say Hamas has failed, have gained nothing from this mayhem. Gaza's gone backwards. Except that's not true. They've gained exactly what they wanted. Their sole aim...
Now, I appreciate what Chris is about to say. It does appear on the outside that they've gained nothing. And I'm sitting, I must confess, I'm kind of sitting on the fence in relation to this, because the place has been destroyed. Remembering that Hamas didn't destroy it, the IDF did. But it does raise the question as to where to from here, and whether or not Hamas will be able to either to remain or eliminated, and then who takes over from that point on. And even though they've got this 20-point plan, And we've got people like Tony Blair involved in that, heaven only knows why. And in fact, a most disliked individual, I believe, amongst those people that are in charge of all this. And we've got Egypt involved, and who knows? They're run by a dictator. Who knows what's happening there? And we've got all these other countries, the Arab Emirates, involved, and these people are involved because they see opportunities for development. A lot of these people are there and involved because they see, as Donald Trump does, an opportunity for financial reward. So it isn't about necessarily a humanitarian approach to dealing with the problem in Gaza. It actually becomes about what is in the AE's best interest, the United Arab's interest, the Turkey, Egypt, Lebanon, and these other countries. So what is in their best interest in relation to all of this? That is really the question I think that we need to start to be asking.
Member is to eliminate Israel. Hamas's name actually stands for the Islamic Resistance Movement. They exist to get rid of Israel, and delegitimizing it is a crucial step. So Hamas doesn't care how many Israeli men, women and children it kills. It doesn't even care how many Palestinians are killed in the resultant war. In fact, it deliberately ensures its own people are killed because it wants Israel to be a...
And the other question for me is, Chris, how do you know all of this? How do you know what Hamas want? How do any of us know what they want? You don't know. But you certainly, I guess it gets you clicks, mate, if other people think you know.
A pariah. I mean, as you might have noticed, Hamas is an army who only ever put on a uniform when there's a ceasefire. The rest of the time they pose as civilians. That's what you're dealing with. Hamas feeds out propaganda about Israel deliberately killing civilians.
I don't know whether Chris has ever heard of urban guerrilla warfare, but basically that's what it is, and that's what one would expect.
Or bombing hospitals or starving people. It uses the chaos to feed out those lies, and the Western media goes with the lies rather than the reality, and Israel is demonised. So if...
And I guess that's the main point. We're going to get to the other point in a moment, which are protests. But it is important for people at Sky News to continually tell us, to gaslight us, I guess, in believing that Israel is the victim here and that Hamas are this terrible organisation, which they are. But the Palestinian people, who are subjected to whatever the Hamas do, and there is some element of truth in that, given they have controlled the place for 20 years. But they are the ones who are in control. That they were the ones who have caused the devastation. Hamas has, not the IDF. And it's odd, isn't it, when you look at the extent of the power that Israel has in terms of its weaponry and its supply of weapons from the United States and the rest of the world, how insignificant at the end of the day the people in Gaza have become. I mean, when you look at that, who in the hell, it's a bit like, it makes us more aware of what's happening in Ukraine, I think, and how amazing, and they're fighting, Chris, they're wearing uniforms and fighting with guns that are provided by us against also a very powerful organisation, a country such as Russia. So it puts it all in perspective, I think. It was inevitable that Israel, if they were going to set upon destroying Gaza, they were going to do that. They have done that. This is not, Hamas should not have done what they did on October the 7th. No one's going to deny that. But at the end of the day, this has been horrible, absolutely horrible for the people in Gaza who had nothing to do with this in the first place. So we'll continue with Chris.
Well, you've seen it on our streets. They've got protesters all over the world turning out against Israel, using the propaganda to blame Israel for every death, to fuel anti-Semitism and fire up a global political assault based on visceral hatred.
So we will keep fighting! We will keep fighting until Palestine is free! from the river to the sea. That's what we've always stood for. It's why we were protesting long before the past 2 years, and why we'll keep protesting until we win liberation for the Palestinian people and we bring down the imperialist, racist maniacs that have carried out this crime against humanity.
Just shocking, isn't it?
There's not much I disagree with what that guy said, incidentally. They are maniacs, and the ICC will bring them to justice, hopefully, when all of this has completed. Let's go to more of Chris.
But that's it. That's the Hamas pay dirt. And it worked. It led some national governments, including our own, to criticise Israel, break with the strategy to...
So I'll stop Chris there, because the main point that he's making is that somehow all of us have been gaslit by what has happened in Gaza. So we haven't seen... It's like, you know, if you see something happening and you see and you know that all these people are being killed and they're innocent bystanders, and you're told that they are responsible. I said in one of my posts before, it's like domestic violence where, you know, the system may say that the woman is a victim, or if a woman is raped because her skirts are too short, or because she put herself in a position, or because she didn't say no at the beginning, or whatever the reason is, that somehow she then becomes the perpetrator. It's the same sort of thing where we're being gaslit by Sky News and the Murdoch press generally, because we're confronted by an onslaught of misinformation, which is endeavouring to tell us something that isn't there. That this could have been stopped earlier. They never talk about that. That treaties, that peace agreements were broken by Israel. No one ever talks about that. And that they want a side. They're desperate. They can't see, and I don't understand this. Chris Kennedy's not a stupid man. He's an idiot, but he's not a stupid man. Or maybe he is. But, you know, why isn't it that he can't see what is actually happening here as well? Because we all do. And the other thing too that I think is really important, which is going to come out later, is that the people in the IDF, they will eventually be taken to the ICC. They will be, as in Bosnia, they will be criminalised for what they've done. They will have to face the consequences. Netanyahu will be one of those. And I don't know how these guys on the right are going to argue that they're not, particularly when so many witnesses will be available to tell them exactly what, not just the bombings, but what the IDF soldiers did when they were raiding, raping, killing young people and children while in Gaza. There will be many of them. They probably don't want this to finish, because when it finishes, they're stuffed. They are. And they will be taken to court. And they will be tried. And many of them, hopefully, will be locked up for the rest of their lives for the crimes they have committed. And the same applies to Hamas. Those people that committed their atrocities on October the 7th, the same should also happen to them. There should be justice on both sides of this. But I wonder whether there ever will be on the Israeli side, because the West, through people like Chris Kenny and Murdoch Press, continually want to support Israel. And I guess the reason for that is Israel's the only country, the westernised country to some extent, the non-Muslim country in the Middle East. It's just the way it is. Let me know what you think. I haven't had a look at all the comments here. There seem to be quite a few, so I'm really grateful for all of that. So thanks, everybody. Also, I just wanted to have a look at, so just still on the Gaza thing. So there's this terrible report that came out yesterday with regard to the Palestinians, the Hamas executing Palestinians who they believed were I guess, forming groups that were opposing them. And these groups apparently have been around for a while, and some of these groups have been funded by Israel because they stood against Hamas. And so Hamas decided that they were going to execute them. Now, there's no way in the world any reasonable person could accept what Hamas are doing in this case. But, well, there shouldn't be a but. I apologise for that. The fact is that Hamas are still present in Gaza. If the goal was to eradicate Hamas from Gaza, then that goal at this point has failed. If the groups that have been non-aligned to Hamas are dominant and are being paid now by the IDF to continue the battle, then they're probably losing that battle as well. And so where does that place Israel? Well, I guess what it says is that any chance of a lasting peace, if Hamas is still present there, is unlikely. And if Hamas decide to control, which they have now done apparently, central Gaza, then the peace is on very, very slippery foundations, I would suggest. So there's this article which says Palestinians only had to wait a few hours to discover the peace they were promised in Gaza could sound a lot like war. US President Donald Trump and other world leaders were promising peace. Hamas fighters dragged 7 men into a small square in Gaza City and forced them to kneel on the ground. I'm not going to show you the video. As civilians watched from storefronts around the square, the gunmen raised their automatic weapons and shot the men from behind. A video is available. We're not going to show it. It has been verified by Reuters. It was cited an unnamed Hamas source who confirmed the execution took place on Monday night. There were no Israeli bombings, no tanks rolling through streets, and no bulldozers tearing down Palestinian homes. The killings were not the same as the onslaught the people of Gaza have suffered over the past 2 years. This is inflicted distinctly and directly by Hamas. But there were confirmations that the fighting is not over. One account says the men were killed for being collaborators with Israel. Whatever the reason, the message is the same. Hamas is exerting its authority. Trump has set out a peace plan with 20 points that begin with a ceasefire and the release of the Israeli hostages, but the plan also includes amnesty for Hamas fighters who give up their weapons, the safe passage of their fighters to other countries, and a new transitional authority to run Gaza. This one here, the safe passage of other fighters, of those fighters to other countries, that issue's already been raised in Parliament with regard to the Albanese government as to whether we would accept those people. I don't think we should. The executions tell the world that Hamas does not want safe passage out of Gaza. It wants to bring its fighters back into the areas it once controlled. Eyewitness accounts are rare because most of the media is barred from Gaza. Another story, but the ABC reports that Hamas has mobilised 7,000 fighters to resume its control. Reuters estimates Hamas has killed at least 33 people since Monday. Agence France-Presse reports that Hamas has set up a deterrence force against opponents. There are Israel shootings as well. Israel Defense Forces said they had opened fire on a group of Palestinians approaching them in northern Gaza after they did not comply with orders to stop. The Gaza Health Ministry said 3 people died. So the question, where's that one about the hostages to suspend the ceasefire agreement took 2 hours were returned? There was a report. Right, Israel said it allowed 600 trucks into Gaza on Sunday as the ceasefire took effect, but it has told the United States it would cut this to 300 because Hamas has not met the terms of the ceasefire, so already it's falling apart. There are reports that the Rafah crossing in the South Territory will remain closed. This means punishing Palestinian civilians for the failure of Hamas, but that is not new in the conflict. United Nations Emergency Relief Director Tom Fletcher told the ABC that both sides needed to honour this ceasefire deal. That does not mean that Hamas has got to get the bodies home as they promised, he said, but it also means that Israel has to keep the crossings open and allow us to deliver the aid that is desperately needed at scale. So the issue there, I guess, is that it isn't finished by any means. This is only stage one. If they're able to gather 7,000 of their troops together to fight against these other groups or to fight against Israel, and they're armed, well, the question has to be asked, I guess Iran's still supplying with them arms, but how do they get them in there? I don't know. Don't understand the complications of any of that. So I must say it's reachable, hostage bodies recovered. There is another report. I won't read that one. I guess the issue is that it's a mess. Always has been for 20 odd years, and it's just not going to get any better. And that hopefully we'll find a way to be able to ensure that Palestinian people have an appropriate government, appropriate representation, and that they can be safe and lead their lives as most people will want to lead theirs. I hope that's the answer. So I want to turn to, just have a look at the comment section. By Israel, then released, turn extremist. Would the average person... Sean, that's a reasonable response, I guess. Sean has said, and I can lower that because I'm not dealing with Avery now. It's not the one I wanted. So we'll try again. Would the average person held captive by Israel, then released, turn extremist? The question, Sean, I would pose in relation to that type of question is if you were incarcerated, surrounded by and governed by an external force who had no legitimacy in your land or on your land, and they determined what came in, what went out, barred you from exiting your land, determined what you could eat and what electricity you had, and your general freedoms, your inability to travel, and all those other things. If they were able to influence all of that, I guess you would wind up hating them, wouldn't you? We don't have to look further than the Irish, really, to understand what happens when a group of people feel so oppressed, and particularly, that it becomes kind of like a religious war almost, which is actually what has happened. So, yes, you would. I guess that's a really good question. You would be very, very, very distressed. So I'm turn a bit now to American. So what we're seeing in the United States is horrific. And the question I actually keep asking myself is it likely at any particular point for Australians to experience what the United States experience? Yeah, I do say it's an open air prison, Heather, thanks. Heidi, rather. I do think that it's that the way by which the world is shifting to popularism and authoritarianism is to be wary of. I'm not convinced myself that it will become a dominant force. I think there are too many of us on the other side of politics who will endeavour to push back. The question really is, are there enough of us? And will it be the case in Australia? Because here in Australia, folks, for those that and I do need to put out a cry to all of you to subscribe to my channel, but also let us know where you're from. If you're from overseas, and I do have a number of American subscribers and from Canada, so if you are from overseas, please let us know. it would be helpful. Or if you're from whichever state, just say Sydney, Melbourne, whatever, Timbuktu, which is a really good place, close to here. So let us know. But I think that if we've got to be careful, I guess, about what's happening overseas, and we've got to be mindful that this stuff becomes endemic. So it's a bit like the pandemic. If you don't do anything about it, and if you don't prepare yourself with some sort of vaccination, it will creep up upon you, and it will destroy your life, your well-being, and so on. And we're seeing the rise of populism and authoritarian, or notions around authoritarianism in Europe, the UK through reform, Trump in the United States, and so on. But in Australia, we're kind of a little bit more insulated from it because we have a different electoral system to start with, so that may help. And also, we've recently had an election of a more progressive, I wouldn't say progressive, because there's lots of things that the Labor Party do that I don't agree with, yet we have a less conservative, a more moderate set of politicians, because the things that we confront here, such as climate change and net zero, and now we're confronting the issues which concern most of the populists in this country, in the world, which is about racism, which primarily is about what people identify as mass migration. And I think we need to confront all of that and start talking about it in the most rational way. I don't suggest for a moment that we should be doing something that is about immigration being way out of control. But when they start talking about it in terms of, and this is really pisses me off. So when the right starts talking about immigration in terms of the fact that, housing is impossible for young people to buy a house these days because so many immigrants are coming into the country and they're taking those houses. Well, number one, they're not buying them because they don't have the money to do that. They're not, but they might be renting them. And they may be renting places in which many of their families are living in the one location. So many people living in the one location. But the reality is that it affects, and I did a post on this some time ago, it does increase, or it does affect the housing supply by about 4%. Not significant, not as much as what the right would want us to believe. And they do increase immigrants in certain pockets in the country, increase wages or standard of living by about 0.3 to 5%, very small. So the effect of immigrants really is financially and on homes is really limited. And immigrants do supply. We had, I just had an upgrade to NBN here at my home, and we've had four workers come in over 2 days to do the connection. They were all immigrants. And they were lovely, incidentally. Really, really nice people. Glad to have work. So, and I'm thinking, well, that was 100% of the tradies. I mean, it's only 4, but nevertheless, if it wasn't for the immigrants, we wouldn't have those tradies doing that work. So we need immigrants. The question remains, how many immigrants do we need? What is the number? Most of the people that immigrate to Australia or that are listed as immigrants are those people that come on as students, right? Those people that overstay visas. The main people that come here are those people that fly in and stay. They're the ones that most people get upset about. And then we have Senator Price suggesting for perhaps that there's a specific group of people like Indians who come to this country and vote in a certain way, which was crap. So we wind up, I guess, in my view, with all of these people from the right making assertions about who should be here, who shouldn't be here, No one ever says, and I haven't heard anybody says exactly what is the number. What's the magic number? And not only the magic number, but who are the type of people they want here? Because I know that the focus from the Immigration Department is really on skilled labour. So that is the focus. If you've got skill that we need, come over. That is for sure, providing you pass all the other tests. I did hear One Nation say, Pauline Hanson, say that people have, she said this recently, she said this 35 years ago, she's still saying it, that somehow people must be able to speak English articulately. Well, you know, my response to Pauline around that is you don't speak English articulately, so F off. You don't know what you're talking about, and hasn't for years. And then we have another thing, my rant, then we have Pauline Hanson, who has increased the percentage. This is the other thing that concerns me. Pauline, One Nation have increased their vote, according to the polls, from 6 to 12%. Most of the people that have now shifted to them come from the Liberal Party. They're not taking anyone from the Tills, and they're not necessarily taking people. They are taking some, but not all the people from who vote Labor. So they're becoming a force. They feel emboldened now. One Nation. They're thinking they can control the Senate. They can have a great time. But the reality here in Australia is that if you wish any real power in terms of governance, you must come from the House of Representatives. They don't have a single member in the House of Representatives. The irony of that is that in 1996, when Pauline was first elected, she was in the House of Representatives until she was kicked out by the Liberal Party for being too far right. So and I guess that's the indicator. The indicator is One Nation are improving their percentage vote. They are relatively powerless, but they certainly could have some control and some influence if they won enough seats in the Senate. But there then would be the Liberal Party, the National Party, and the Greens, and some independents that would stand up against them as well. So they wouldn't become all that influential, even though they might become more so than they are right now. I agree with all of that, but nevertheless. So One Nation are an issue and an indicator. But whether or not that will last for 2 or 3 years, who knows? You take a poll today, in 12 months' time, it's likely to be completely different anyway. So no one's really does know. So the reason why I brought all of that up was that I'm wondering, and this is a question I'm going to put to all of you, do you think it's possible that in Australia we can ever have a situation like they are now experiencing in the US, where authoritarianism becomes part of the playbook? It becomes part of who you are, and that you have to fight back against it like they now have to fight back in the US. Is that ever likely to happen here? I hope not, but then stranger things have happened. So let's wait and see. So one of the things I want to talk about too was this issue about, which I found interesting, and I guess I'll finish on this. I've been going for 50 minutes, so for me, that's a long time, just on my own. So this is Candice Owens, Australia's High Court backs government decision to deny visa to a right wing. Court supports Home Affairs Minister 2024 decision to reject visa application for planned speaking tour on character grounds. Australia's High Court has unanimously backed the government 2024 decision. Far-right provocateur, Candice Owens, terrible woman. Now, my issue here is that I personally don't think, I don't care how bad she is. And she's pretty terrible. I've seen some of her stuff. She's a revolting woman in terms of my values. But, you know, why would we ban her? So Tony Burke, on October 24, refused visa application. He had a planned national speaking tour, arguing that she had a capacity to incite discord. I would argue that Chris Kenny has the capacity to create discord, and Andrew Bolt and Paul Murray and Rita Panahi and all of those guys, maybe they should be deported. Maybe that's the next step. Burke said at the time the US conservative influencer had podcast hosts who has advanced conspiracy theories, anti-Semitic rhetoric, including minimising Nazi medication. And these things are true. And she's, as I said, she's a revolting individual. But I reckon it would have been more appropriate for her to come to Australia and find out that we're not like they are in America. Now, she would attract some people because there are people that think like she does, but that's her right. And if there's organisations that are prepared to pay for her to come here, which I'm sure there were, then so be it. Who cares? Owen's lawyers argued the character test was more likely to exclude non-mainstream political views that sparked division. The threshold of inciting discord to reject a visa was so broad it could capture disagreement and robust debate, and was very much in the eye of the beholder. This means the visa could be withheld from people who will stimulate debate the minister doesn't like. Now, the interesting thing about that is that's what's happening in the United States. That very thing. The very thing that her lawyer is arguing is the very thing that is happening in the United States, and that to some extent Candace Owen, because of her political views, would agree with. All the judges unanimously held that reading the minister's decision fairly and as a whole, the minister did not misconstrue the act and decided in the future to grant. So the minister has the power to do that. So be it. Then I wanted to take us to this one. Now, I found this interesting. So I don't know if anybody's seen this. This is Big John. So Big John was banned from entering Australia. So he arrives in Australia. And this article didn't have the whole story, which I found very disappointing from the ABC. So British social media star is a star. And he's a star because he eats Chinese food. How bizarre is that? On TikTok, apparently. So Big John says he's been deported from Australia after apparently failing to comply with visa requirements. His name is John Fisher. He's famed for his love of Chinese food and his catchphrase, Bosh. Anyway, he's believed to have flown into Perth to attend an event at Ascot Racecourse. Beach Club Orion Escalant said he had booked Fisher to appear in the club. Why in the hell are you booking this guy to eat Chinese food? I'll never know. But anyway, welcome to social media. He said it's bizarre. He even said the Border Force, he would stop all his engagements, but they weren't having it. So he agreed to that. Because the visa was legal coming in, but they're not happy with what? No. What happened was, apparently, he had the wrong visa. So he could fly into the country, but he had, I don't know what the visa number is or what the application meant, but he just had the wrong visa. It wasn't about anything he was going to talk about. He's not a Candace Owen. He's going to talk about fish or chips or things that, set the British on fire, I guess. But he wasn't going to talk about anything necessarily controversial from what I understand. So bad luck you, buddy. So then it comes to this story. Bear with me. Oh, no, wrong one. Hold on, I missed it. Oh, no, this was it, sorry. US, this one I'm doing on my own, it's just so confusing. US provokes visas from 6 foreign nationals for social media comments. So US, so still about visas. US revokes visas from 6 foreign nationals for social media comment critics of Charles Kerr. In a stunning departure from an administration that came to power vowing to stop social media censorship, Donald Trump's State Department announced on Tuesday that it had revoked the visas of 6 foreign nationals who posted critical comments on social media about Charlie Kirk in the wake of the Conservatives' activist murder. The United States has no obligation to host a foreigner who wishes death on Americans. I don't know what they said in their posts. And a lot of those posts were inappropriate. They were stupid. People got a bit carried away. I certainly wouldn't wish death on anybody, including Charlie Kirk, but apparently some people did. The United States has no obligation to host foreigners who wish death on Americans. The State Department continues to identify visa holders who celebrated the heinous assassination of Charlie Kirk. So, the issue is we've got Candice Owen, we've got who was out to come to Australia because she was divisive. We've got John Fisher, Big John, who simply had the wrong visa, and we've got in America they're not letting you into the country or not providing with a visa if on TikTok or whatever in social media you were jubilant about Charlie Kirk's death. And it's kind of made me wonder where we're sitting with regard to the visa. Who are we letting in? And then we've got this immigration issue on the other hand, and we've got ISIS brides coming in from wherever, which I don't care about, and their kids couldn't give a shit, but clearly people do. And then we've got these people coming out of Gaza. Don't know how they're getting out. Nevertheless, some will, I guess, and some have. But they, how are we assessing them? Do we trust ASIO to be able to do the appropriate assessments to make sure that they're going to behave themselves while in Australia, they don't hold extreme views? And then we've got these extreme views of someone like Candice Owen, who is banned from coming to Australia. I know she's not immigrating, and I know there might be a difference, but she's not coming as a result. So this is just confusing about what's happening around the world as to who should come into what country and why and how and what for. So Clive Payne, right. So you're having a discussion there, Sean, sorry. Came down under challenge Clive in a Big Mac eating contest. Okay, you guys are just talking amongst yourselves. 400, yeah. So continue having the conversation. I've enjoyed my conversation with you. It's been almost an hour, which is kind of a record for me to do this. Do remember that on Tuesdays I do another live feed. Thursday, try and do it with Avery. And in the meantime, I'd like to be able to have conversations with people who have got a story to tell. You don't need to be famous. You don't need to be newsworthy. I believe most people have a story that they could tell that will be inspirational, that may be sad as well. But I want to tell those stories as part of my thing. So let me know in the comment section if you wish to. I'll make available my email address and my telephone number so you can call me. Thanks everybody for being with me. Take care, look after yourselves, and be safe.